It began the first night I moved back into my childhood home. After Dad passed, the place sat empty for nearly a year. My sister and I argued about what to do with it. She wanted to sell it immediately. I felt different. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe nostalgia. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to let go. Either way, I convinced her to let me stay here for a while. Just me and my dog, Tucker. Tucker is a good boy. A mutt with a golden heart and the bark of a demon. He never barked for no reason. Not once in the 7 years I'd had him. That's why it was so strange when he started barking at the ceiling on the very first night. We were sitting in the living room, the last boxes unopened in the corner, Netflix buffering eternally because I hadn't reset the router yet. Tucker sat beside me on the old leather couch, tail wagging lazily. Then, without warning, he stiffened. His ears pricked up. He turned his head slowly, stared at the ceiling, and let out a deep, menacing growl. I followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the ceiling fan, spinning lazily. Then, woof. He barked, once, sharp and loud. Woof, woof, woof. He wouldn't stop. His body was tense, his tail rigid, eyes locked on a spot above us. Not the ceiling fan, I realized. A little farther back, closer to the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Or more accurately, right above that hallway. I stood up and walked over, trying to see what had triggered him. A raccoon on the roof? Maybe a squirrel? But then it hit me. There's nothing above that hallway. I blinked. This house was a one-story ranch. No attic. No crawl space. Nothing. Just insulation and rafters and the roof. So what the hell was Tucker barking at? I knelt and tried to calm him down, running my hands through his fur. He didn't stop growling until I carried him into the bedroom and closed the door. That night, I didn't sleep well. And at exactly 2:41 a.m., Tucker barked again, 3 sharp bursts, directly at the ceiling above our bed. The next morning, I climbed onto the roof. Maybe there was a damaged vent cover or a hole. Maybe birds had nested. I checked every square inch of it and found nothing. That afternoon, I drove into town to visit the hardware store. The same guy still owned it, Mr. Kingsley. He recognized me instantly, even after 15 years. We talked. I bought some sealant for weatherproofing, and before I left, I asked, "Hey, this is gonna sound weird. Did my dad ever mention animals getting into the roof, or anything like that?" Kingsley paused. He glanced toward the front window. "He never complained about animals," he said. "But there's something you should know about that house." He leaned in a little. "Your dad came in one day, maybe a year before he passed, asking about ladders. Big ones. I sold him a telescoping ladder that could reach 2 stories high. Okay. He said he needed it to check something. But he was acting strange, like he didn't want to say what. I asked if he was okay. He looked at me dead in the eye and said, 'Something's moving above the hallway at night.' I felt my stomach drop. I didn't sleep at all that night. Tucker barked again. Same time, 2:41 a.m. Only this time, it was louder. Frenzied. Terrified. I turned on every light in the house. I even opened the crawl space beneath the floorboards just to prove to myself that there was nothing else in the house. No animal, no wiring issues, no vents that could explain the sounds. Nothing. But at 2:41 a.m., every night without fail, Tucker barked. On the 5th night, I decided to stay awake and record it. I placed my phone on the dresser, camera pointed at the ceiling. I set up another phone in the hallway. Tucker lay curled at my feet, unusually silent. For once, I hoped maybe it wouldn't happen. But it did. Exactly at 2:41, Tucker snapped awake, stared upward, and unleashed a snarl so deep it sounded like it came from his bones. I froze. My eyes went to the ceiling. Something creaked. Faint but unmistakable. Like footsteps. Not rats. Not squirrels. Steps. Deliberate. Pacing. Directly above the hallway. And then, something even worse. From my phone on the dresser, I heard the hallway camera pick up a whisper. Faint. Strained. Like a voice, but wrong. Something trying to speak, but not knowing how. Tucker whined, pressed against my legs. My body locked up. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I didn't move until sunrise. When I reviewed the footage, I saw something I can't explain. In the video from the hallway camera, right as the whisper cuts in, there's a shadow. It passes along the ceiling. Not across the wall. On the ceiling itself. As if something crawled, not walked, from one side of the hall to the other. And I swear to God it had hands. Long, thin, dragging. I didn't tell anyone what I saw on the footage. Who could I even tell? My sister? She'd just tell me to move out, sell the place like she wanted from the start. The police? They'd ask what I'd been drinking, but I couldn't stop thinking about that shadow, the way it moved, the way it dragged its fingers across the ceiling like it was testing something. The next morning, I climbed up into the attic. Or rather, I tried. Because, again, there is no attic. I pulled apart the ceiling panels in the hallway, trying to prove myself wrong. But all I found was insulation and drywall. Not even enough space to crawl between the joists. And yet, there were scratches. Faint grooves in the wood. Long ones. Parallel. As if something with claws or fingers had been dragging itself across the beams just above the drywall. I took photos. Measured the grooves. They were spaced like human hands. Too far apart to be rats. Too deliberate. That day, I left the house and checked into a motel across town. Tucker came with me. For the first time in a week, he slept soundly. But I didn't. Because I had an idea I couldn't shake. What if this thing, whatever it was tied to the house? To the structure itself? I went to the county records office the next morning. Took me an hour, but I found the original blueprint for the house. That's when I saw it. Right there on the oldest version of the layout, a storage crawlspace above the hallway, sealed off in a remodel from 1971. It had been part of the original framing when the house was built in the 1940s, just big enough to lie down in. It didn't appear on the modern blueprints. In fact, there was no way to access it. No hatch. No panel. It had been sealed over decades ago. I called my sister. Did Dad ever mention anything about an attic space? Or like, storage above the hallway? She hesitated. No. Why? I debated for a second. Tucker keeps barking at the ceiling. Same spot. Every night. Now she hesitated. I remember that. From when I was a kid. He used to bark at that same place sometimes, too. Mom would tell us to ignore it. My skin prickled. We don't have an attic, I said. I know, she whispered. That evening, I drove back home. Armed with a crowbar, flashlight, and a burning need to know, I climbed a stepladder in the hallway and began tearing into the drywall. Tucker paced below, whining. The plaster broke away easier than I expected. Beneath it was plywood. And under that old wood beams forming a sealed crawl space no more than 3 feet high. I pushed my phone into the gap and turned on the flashlight. The video feed showed something I wasn't prepared for. Claw marks. Everywhere. Deep gouges, some fresh, some decades old. Like someone or something had been dragging themselves in circles. The insulation was shredded, though it stained. And in the center of the crawl space, a small, wooden doll. Its sat propped upright. Handmade. Its head crudely stitched. Black thread for hair. And 2 nails driven into its chest in the shape of an X. I nearly dropped the phone, but I didn't look away. Because next to the doll, there was something else. A tooth. Human-sized. Yellowed. Still wet. I sealed the hole immediately. Not because I wanted to ignore it, but because I needed time. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. That night, I called a local historian, a man named Daryl Pinn who ran a tiny paranormal blog about strange architecture in the state. We met the next day. I showed him the blueprint. He stared at it for a long time before speaking. I've seen this layout before, he said. Where? 3 other houses in this county. Built by the same man, Walter Ibbotson. All of them have sealed crawl spaces above the central hallway. Same dimensions. Same position. And all 3 houses eventually burned down. I felt a chill. What caused the fires? He gave me a long look. 2 were ruled electrical. The 3rd, they never found a cause. But the owner had called 911 earlier that night to say something was crawling inside his walls. When I returned home, the house felt different. Heavier. I couldn't explain it. Just this. Presence, like the walls were watching me. That night, Tucker wouldn't come down the hallway. He stood frozen at the corner, tail between his legs, growling low and constant. I picked him up and carried him inside. At 2:41 a.m., he didn't bark. He whimpered. And then, I heard it. The whisper again. This time closer. More coherent. Like a voice behind the drywall. Not in the ceiling anymore. Inside the walls. I pressed my ear to the wall. Faint breathing. Shallow. Wet. Like something sucking in air through broken lungs. And then, directly beneath my palm, came a sound that nearly made me collapse. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks right beneath my hand. Knock. 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 I didn't sleep at all after that. At sunrise, I returned to the crawl space and pulled the panel open again. The doll was gone, but the tooth was still there. And now, there were 2. I left the crawlspace open that day. It was a mistake. I thought I was being brave confronting it. But in truth, I was just giving it permission. After I discovered the second tooth, I spent hours researching Ibbotson. The man was an enigma, no photographs, no known descendants. Just a handful of newspaper clippings about houses he designed between 1942 and 1949, all identical in layout, each with a sealed space, and each with at least one unexplained death. One of the articles mentioned whispers. That caught my attention. I looked up the house in that story. It was in Greenville, 20 miles south. The family who lived there in 1978 reported scratching behind the walls, furniture being rearranged, and voices whispering their daughter's name. The daughter, age 9, disappeared from her bed. The only thing they found was a small wooden doll under her pillow with its mouth sewn shut. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that it was all in my head. That night, I taped a cross above the crawlspace, lit a candle, left a small offering of salt and lavender, somewhere between superstition and desperation. Tucker wouldn't come near me. He stood at the far end of the house, staring down the hall with wide eyes, growling low. I set my phone to record again, propped it facing the open crawlspace. Then I went to bed with every light on. 2:41 a.m. The whispering returned. Louder. Urgent. But this time, not just one voice. Multiple. Speaking over one another in strained, broken English, like people trying to mimic human speech without understanding it. I held Tucker close as he trembled violently in my arms. He didn't bark. He just shook. Then came the knock again, but not from inside the wall. From the bedroom door. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just stared at the doorknob as it twitched, like something was nudging it from the other side. I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I could unlock the screen, the light bulb in the ceiling burst. Glass rained down. Tucker yelped. The entire room went dark. In that split second of darkness, I heard it. A sound I'll never forget. Breathing. Inside the room. And then, a whisper directly in my ear. Not from the phone. Not from the wall. Right next to me. 2 words. Open me. I must have blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. The bedroom door was still closed. My phone was dead. The candle in the hall had melted into a dark, waxy smear. The salt was gone. The cross had fallen. And from the crawlspace? A noise. Chewing. Wet. Smacking. Chewing. I called my sister again. I need your help, I said. It's about Dad. She arrived that afternoon, skeptical but concerned. She always thought I had a tendency to spiral ever since our mom died when we were kids. But when I showed her the crawlspace, her face went pale. Dad used to tell me, never to go near here, she whispered. He said it was where the house breathed. I thought he was joking. We climbed up together. I pulled out the flashlight. The doll was back, but now its mouth was open, and something black leaked from it, staining the plywood below. And next to it were 3 teeth. Not human. Too long. Curved. Hollow in the center like bird bones. My sister climbed down and refused to speak for the rest of the night. At 2:41 a.m., she knocked on my bedroom door. Her voice was trembling. I heard it, she said, from inside the vents. It said my name. We didn't sleep. Instead, we huddled in the living room with every light on and the TV playing static. The dog barked once. Just once. And then we heard something else. Footsteps. Coming down the hallway. But not on the floor. From the ceiling. I grabbed the crowbar and stood between my sister and the hall. She clutched Tucker to her chest, her face white. The footsteps stopped just outside the living room. Then, scrape. A long, dragging sound across the ceiling, like fingernails on wood, followed by that same awful whisper. Open me. We left at dawn. Stayed at a motel on the highway for 3 days. Tucker was calm. My sister tried to talk me into leaving permanently, burning the house down, calling a priest. But I couldn't. Something wanted me to stay, and I needed to understand why. On the 4th night, I returned alone. The house was dark, cold, lifeless, until I stepped inside. Then it woke up. The hallway lights flickered. My breath frosted in the air despite it being June. The cross I had taped back up? Gone. The candle? Smashed. And in the center of the hallway, right beneath the sealed crawl space, a new doll. Not handmade. Store-bought. Plastic. Old. A child's toy from the 80s. And tied to its arm? A string of dog fur. Tucker's fur. I didn't take the doll. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. But I did something worse. I looked up. The crawl space was open again. I hadn't opened it. I was sure I had sealed it before I left. Now, the plywood panel lay on the floor like it had been pried out from the inside. The space above the hallway stared down like a mouth. And for the first time since all this started, I climbed in. The air inside was heavy, not dusty wet, like breathing through cloth soaked in rot. I held the flashlight steady, scanning every corner. The walls were covered in marks. Symbols scratched deep into the wood. Some looked like old runes. Others, like stick figures dancing in circles. But in the far corner was something new. A trapdoor. I stared at it, heart pounding. There had never been a trapdoor in the crawl space. No records of it on the blueprint. No latch visible from the hallway. It was about 2 feet wide, made of aged oak, and sealed with a rusted iron loop. Against every instinct in my body, I reached forward and pulled. The door creaked open, and below me, stairs, leading downward. That should have been impossible. The crawl space was only a few feet above the hallway. There was no way there could be a staircase descending from this space. But I saw it. Old wooden steps disappearing into complete blackness. The light from my phone flashlight barely reached the 5th step. I hesitated. Then I called out, "Hello?" The answer came instantly. A voice. Whispering. Not behind the wall. Not above. From the stairs. "Come see." I slammed the trapdoor shut and scrambled out, heart hammering in my chest. I sealed the crawl space again and nailed a wooden plank over it. Then I packed a bag. I had to leave. This time for good. I called my sister, told her I was getting Tucker and going. I didn't even care if we lost the house. We could sell it for $1. Let it rot. Let it burn. She agreed. I loaded the car and went to grab Tucker. But he wasn't in the house. I searched everywhere. Bedroom. Kitchen. Yard. I screamed his name until my throat burned. Then I saw it. The hallway door, wide open. And on the floor, muddy paw prints. Leading toward the crawl space. The plank I nailed over it? Ripped away. I climbed up, flashlight trembling in my hand. Inside, the trapdoor was open again. And at the top of the stairs was Tucker. Silent. Staring down. I called him. He didn't move. I crawled toward him, reached out, and he turned. His eyes were glassy. Wide. Like he'd seen something he couldn't understand. Then he barked. Once. Sharp and final. And bolted down the stairs. I screamed his name and followed. The stairs went on forever. Far deeper than the house should have allowed. 10 steps. 20. 30. Until the air grew cold and the wood beneath my hands felt wet. At the bottom, a door. Old. Carved with symbols like the ones in the crawl space. I pushed it open. Inside. A room. Larger than the house. No walls. Just darkness. And in the center. A bed. Not a real bed. A slab. Stone. Like an altar. And on it. My dog. Curled. Sleeping. Or maybe not. I ran to him. His chest moved. Barely. But around the slab, on the floor, were dolls. Hundreds of them. All facing the bed. Some handmade. Others rotted by time. One of them had my face. Another had my sister's. A third was identical to Tucker. And then I heard them. Footsteps. From behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just the dolls. But now, some had moved. I backed away, grabbing Tucker, cradling him to my chest. A whisper filled the space. Not from one voice, but hundreds. Lie down. Lie down. Lie down. Over and over, louder and louder, until it was a scream of voices hissing like wine through dead leaves. Lie down. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to the house. I just remember slamming the front door behind me and collapsing to the floor with Tucker still limp in my arms. He stirred an hour later, then threw up something dark onto the kitchen tile. Inside the vomit? A doll's eye. Glass. Cracked. Blinking. Just once. Then still. Tucker didn't bark again for 3 nights. He didn't eat. Barely drank. He just stared at the ceiling and trembled. I slept in the living room with him curled next to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those dolls. The stone bed. The endless black. And the voices. They'd followed me back. Not whispers anymore. Now they spoke clearly. One phrase. Always the same. Lie down. I decided to burn the crawl space. I couldn't destroy the whole house. Not without getting arrested, or worse, drawn back into that place beneath the stairs. But I could seal it. In the opening they'd used. I waited until 2:30 a.m. I knew they'd be active by then. I knew they'd hear me. That was the point. I climbed into the hallway ceiling and poured lighter fluid all across the beams, around the trapdoor, on the dolls. I lit a match and spoke out loud. "You don't belong here." I dropped the match. The fire took instantly. It roared through the insulation, eating into the wood with hungry cracks. I climbed down and ran outside with Tucker. The flames didn't spread far, just enough to consume the crawl space. By the time the fire department arrived, the roof was singed, but the house stood. And the trapdoor? Gone. Reduced to ash. I moved out the next morning. My sister sold the house a month later. We didn't disclose what happened. We just said there was minor fire damage and let it go cheap. She never looked back. But I did. 6 months later, I got a message from the new owner. A short email. "Hey, this is probably nothing, but do you know if there used to be an attic or storage above the hallway? Our dog keeps barking at the ceiling, always at 2:41 a.m. Just wondering if you ever noticed anything weird." I didn't reply. Tucker's never been the same. He sleeps beside me every night now, and sometimes I catch him growling in his sleep. Other times, I hear it too. A scrape, faint and slow, like something dragging itself across the ceiling beams. Only problem is, I live on the top floor of a 3-story building now. Above me, just the roof, and a maintenance hatch no one ever opens. Last week, I heard it again. The knock, 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 knock. I opened the hatch the next day. Found nothing. Just dust, pipes, wires, and a single doll, sitting upright, looking directly at the hatch. It had no eyes, just a stitched mouth, and dog fur sewn into its chest. I don't think it matters where I go anymore. It followed me, or maybe it always lived above me, just waiting, just whispering, waiting for someone to lie down, to listen, to open.